It wasn't a gentle nudge or a sly jab, this was a televised dismantling. Graham Norton, known for his razor-sharp wit and a knack for deflating inflated egos, didn't hold back when Meghan Markle's latest podcast debacle came up. On live TV, in front of millions, he carved into the very core of what she's been selling to the public, her self-styled image as a voice of authenticity and empowerment. The problem? The product simply didn't match the pitch. Instead of compelling conversations, Meghan's podcast delivered awkward silences, scripted empathy, and forced relatable moments that reeked of a carefully manufactured brand, not genuine connection. Norton's reaction wasn't exaggerated, it was the unfiltered truth said aloud, and the audience knew it. From the moment he rolled his eyes mid-discussion, it was clear Norton wasn't buying the glossy PR narrative. The show's atmosphere shifted. Here was a man who's hosted royalty, movie stars, and legends. Yet Meghan's offering didn't just fall short, it collapsed under the weight of its own pretension. Listeners had already begun abandoning the podcast weeks before. Reviews painted it as self-indulgent and painfully inauthentic. Norton's words simply crystallized what the public was already whispering. The so-called intimate storytelling Meghan promised felt less like heartfelt conversation and more like a scripted monologue meant to flatter her own brand. Every topic seemed to circle back to her struggles, her wisdom, her journey, while her guests became background props to her self-promotion. Norton, with his trademark bite, cut through the act, pointing out what no loyal fan wanted to admit. The podcast wasn't a platform for voices. It was a pedestal for one. What made the moment so brutal was that Norton didn't need to raise his voice or lean on cheap insults. His measured tone and dry delivery made it sting more. If this is meant to be a conversation, he quipped, someone might want to tell her guests they're allowed to speak. Laughter roared across the audience, not the polite kind, but the genuine, uncontrollable kind that erupts when someone finally says what everyone's thinking. The numbers back him up. Since its much-hyped launch, Meghan's podcast saw an initial surge, thanks to a marketing blitz and media coverage that positioned it as a groundbreaking venture. But by the third episode, engagement had plummeted. Social media was flooded with clips mocking awkward moments, overproduced sound design, and Meghan's tendency to interrupt her guests with long-winded personal anecdotes. Graham's takedown didn't just echo public sentiment, it validated it. And perhaps that's what made her seething reaction so telling. Behind the polished smiles and controlled responses, there was an undeniable flicker of anger in her eyes. She's built a career on controlling her narrative, crafting every appearance and interview to reinforce her carefully curated image. To have that stripped away on one of the UK's most popular shows by someone with a global audience wasn't just a blow to her ego, it was a direct threat to her brand. Graham Norton has faced his share of backlash over the years, but what separates his critiques from cheap tabloid sniping is that they land on a foundation of fact. He doesn't invent, he exposes. And on this occasion, the exposure was devastating. There was no editing bay to cut his comments, no PR buffer to soften the impact, no palace press office to issue a statement. Just an unfiltered, national broadcast truth bomb detonating in real time. By the time the segment ended, Meghan's podcast wasn't just a questionable product, it was a confirmed failure in the eyes of an audience that trusts Norton's instincts. That trust matters. When a respected host calls out pretension masked as empowerment, the public listens. And for Meghan, whose public perception hinges on being seen as a voice of authenticity, the damage is far deeper than one bad review, it's the unraveling of an illusion. If there's one thing the night proved, it's that the Meghan Markle brand may be global, but it isn't untouchable. On live TV, under the glare of stage lights, and in the court of public opinion, Graham Norton didn't just critique a podcast, he exposed a performance. And this time, there was no script she could read from to win the audience back. The silence that followed was almost as loud as the laughter that had erupted moments earlier. Meghan sat there, visibly trying to hold her composure, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her. This wasn't a playful jab she could spin into a charming anecdote, it was a dismantling in real time, with no safety net. Norton had effectively pulled the curtain back, showing the mechanics of a show that had been sold as organic but was, in reality, overproduced and underwhelming. What stung most was that this wasn't coming from a gossip columnist or a rival entertainer, it was coming from a figure widely respected for his fair but frank approach. Viewers trust Graham Norton not because he panders, but because he calls things as they are. And in that moment, the judgment was crystal clear. Meghan's podcast was not the revolutionary work she had promised. By the time the segment wrapped, the damage was irreversible. Social media lit up within minutes. Clips circulating with captions like, "He said what we've all been thinking." In one sharp, unsparing exchange, Norton had stripped away the polish, leaving Meghan with nothing but the raw, unvarnished truth and a public no longer willing to pretend otherwise.